Hi viewer, please watch, like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel. There is a lot of practice material available on our YouTube channel. Thank you.
You will hear part of a lecture about studying history. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to begin this term's lectures with a discussion of the various sub-disciplines in history. Before I do that, though, can I refer you to the handout you picked up on the way in? It deals with two general topics. The first is, why study history? And the second is, what is history? Neither of these questions has an easy answer. In fact, people have been asking these questions for as long as history has been studied. However, as you are mostly new students to this subject, and we have some students of economics with us also, I feel you should have some background to these basic questions. Anyway, it's all in the handout. I might add that, for me personally, the most important reason for studying history is that I find it exciting. Our ancestors can remain, if we want them to, a mystery, a closed book, a blackness that we never see into, or we can come to know what motivated them and discover how that led to the world we live in today.
Now answer questions 4 to 10.
You who have chosen to pursue the study of history are very fortunate. This is a time when we can talk not just about history, but histories. Traditionally, history was seen as one subject, and the subject matter was clear. It was about kings and queens and wars. Additionally, it was about states and empires, or groups of states. This is what we now call political history. The subtopics were the parts of the world, for example, the history of China or of France. History has moved on somewhat, and we can learn a lot about current views of history by looking at the proposed lecture topics in our leading universities. In fact, you'll see that even the simplest definition of history, that it is about what happened in the past, is up for grabs. Some of the more, how shall I put it, progressive areas of study are as much about what should happen in the future. One example of this is the field of postmodern history. Likewise, feminist history looks at the past to make sure the future will be different, and it uses the past to assist in its efforts to make the future as it wants it to be. Somewhere in the middle of these two extremes lie a range of areas of study which have developed over the modern period, replacing the traditional idea of political history. These are by now mostly well established. You can study social history or economic history. Social history asks about the ordinary people and their lives, not just their daily lives, but their contribution to changes in our society. Ordinary people have desires and wishes which they try to put into effect, and this has a massive effect on social development which was not fully understood in the traditional study of history. By the way, one area of traditional history which I forgot to mention, but which has had a resurgence of interest in recent years, is the area of military history. This was, of course, of great practical use in more violent times, and unfortunately has become of increasing use and interest, academically and practically, in our own times. By the way, there is a new series of lectures on military history in our department, as if to demonstrate the truth of what I've just said. Ethnic and multicultural history are further examples of kinds of history which, like social history, differ from the traditional forms. Ethnic history is a modern concern which concentrates on the value systems and beliefs of a people, usually a minority people, which were ignored in the rapid forward march of the rich and powerful nations and states. How various ethnic groups live together, and how their traditions change and develop is the subject of its contemporary cousin, multicultural history. In sum, as I said, you are fortunate to have such a wide choice of things to study in the fields of history. Choose wisely. And finally, it only remains for me to wish you good luck in your studies.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a guide at the Summerland tourist attraction talking to a group of visitors. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Welcome to Summerland. I'm your guide, Jackie, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do and have here before I take you on a tour of the facilities. In our air-conditioned restaurant, we can cater for anyone from the individual diner to families and tour groups. We also do functions such as weddings, conferences, birthday parties, and so on. We have a delicious modern menu on offer in the restaurant, or perhaps you'd prefer to sit outside in the courtyard overlooking the lush tropical gardens. And for those booking a function, we devise an interesting set menu according to the type of celebration and the client's budget. If formal dining isn't what you're after, we operate a takeaway food bar, which has a range of light snacks and refreshments. Just the thing if you're supervising children in the playground. The playground and picnic area makes a great alternative to the beach. If you've remembered to bring your bathing suit and a towel, you can cool off in the water spray park. Parents can sit back, relax, and enjoy a coffee, while the kids have fun in our fully fenced, shady playground and picnic area. What a way to make the most of the warmth and sunshine we have here in abundance. The older children will love to visit the historic cottage with their parents. This was the original homestead on the property and is now preserved as a museum with an educational DVD and cinema room. You'll find the information centre here also, and you'll be able to pick up some glossy brochures to take home with you and show your friends. Don't worry, we have more than enough leaflets for you to take home. Visit the gift shop and you'll find an enormous variety of local products, fine foods and handicrafts on sale. Some say that this is the best displayed and priced shop in the region. There is more to be admired and purchased in the garden nursery, which has an extensive range of flower pots, indoor and outdoor plants, statues, and all kinds of other garden accessories to adorn any home or garden. While we're on the topic of gifts and such, I must mention the woodcrafting shed and urge you to take a look at the amazing products that the woodcrafting team produces there. You'll be able to watch them at work and buy anything they've made. The toys they produce are not only original, but some of the finest craftwork you'll ever see. Take your little ones by the hand and keep an eye on them, because they'll want to play with these, but they can't be played with unless they're paid for. Last but not least are the orchards. The Summerland tourist attraction is actually a working farm with over 40 hectares of macadamia and avocado trees. The macadamia nuts are picked by machine from April through to September. The avocados are grown, hand-harvested, packed, and marketed on site.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, are you all set for the tour? We'll leave the car park and walk in an easterly direction towards the administration building with the parking spaces outside. We won't go into the admin building because there's nothing much to see there. Instead, we'll walk in a northeasterly direction towards the museum. But before we get to it, we're going to turn right, walk past it, and go into that enormous building to watch how the avocados are graded and packed. Well, what did you think of that? Those packers have to work very fast, as you can see. Now, as we come out of this building, we'll go to our left and around the back towards the cool room. Of course, this is where all the fruit is stored after packing. There are a lot of boxes of fruit in there. Nothing very interesting to look at, but we will stop at the other building to see how they make the cardboard cartons. See how everything is mechanized, so there is very little labor involved? I'm intrigued by how those machines operate, just like clockwork. It does get very hot in there, though, doesn't it? Which makes the thought of a peek inside the cool room quite attractive. But no, we'll skip that and make towards the building in the far northeastern corner of the facility, where they take the husks off the macadamia nuts. It's quite noisy, but absolutely fascinating. Now we'll take a shortcut heading west through the orchard to the woodcrafter's workroom and shop, and I'll give you a few minutes to browse. Take note of where this is because I'm sure you'll want to come back here later this afternoon in your free time. Is everyone still with us? Right, let's go south now and take a leisurely walk through the picnic and playground area with the water feature. But we want to end up over at the garden shop at the northern end of the car park. We'll have to walk through the little gift shop first to gain access to the garden shop, and I'm sure you won't be able to resist getting some nice little presents for the folks at home. Are you ready for lunch now? I know it's been a whirlwind tour, but the restaurant has us booked in for 12:30, and after that, you're free to take your time wandering around until the bus leaves at 3 p.m.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. John has applied to train as a teacher and is being interviewed. In this stage of the interviewer will discuss John's previous studies and work experiences. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Five. Listen carefully to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 21 to 25. Hello, come in and take a seat. You are John Evans?
Yes, I am.
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, the purpose of this part of the interview is to go over your CV and talk a little further about your previous studies and experiences.
Yes.
So, your first degree was in French, of course.
Yes, with a minor in film studies.
An interesting combination. Mostly French films, presumably?
Well, European cinema in general, but with a bias towards French cinema.
Ah, and your degree took 4 years?
Yes. In the third year, I was an exchange student at Bruges University in Belgium. I was there for a full academic year, 9 months.
Right. Well, you graduated 2 years ago, and then you took some time out, as it were.
Yes, I spent 6 months as a volunteer working on restoring historic buildings in France.
Oh. Was that with a well-known organisation?
They're called restoration vacations here, but they operate under different names in several countries. I think they're quite well known.
So, it was a 6-month vacation, really?
No, I went for a week, but really liked it, and I got asked to stay on as a translator. Because I could speak French quite well, it was my job to liaise between the owners of the buildings and the English-speaking volunteers.
That must have been a very enjoyable experience. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Well, it was certainly a very enjoyable experience to begin with, but after the first 3 months or so, I actually got a bit bored. I was talking about the same things every day. Bricks, cement, window frames, that kind of thing. It wasn't really stretching my French. Also, I wasn't getting paid, just free accommodation and food, plus some pocket money.
Oh, I see. So then you started working for a bank in Paris, BCFC, I think. Yes. Were you doing entirely translating again?
Well, translating was the major part of it, mostly from English into French this time. Official documents, letters, that kind of thing. Much more challenging. But I was also in charge of coordinating the translation work going on in the bank's offices in Switzerland, Belgium, and other parts of France.
What did that involve?
It was simple, really. I just had to keep track of what had been translated in each office. To save wasting time having the same document translated twice in different offices.
So, you stayed there for a year and a half, and then you left. Why was that?
Simple, to apply for this course.
I see. Why give up a secure job in Paris to train as a teacher here?
I've always imagined that I'd be a teacher, really. I loved being in Paris, but I wouldn't want to spend the rest of my life working for a bank.
Do you think your experiences in France will help you as a teacher of French?
It certainly helped my French, and my experiences certainly gave me a much better understanding of French culture, although that may not be of enormous use when it comes to standing up in front of a class of British 13-year-olds.
Perhaps not. Thank you very much. The next stage of the interview will be conducted by my colleague in room 207. That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a talk given by a lecturer in the Environmental Studies Department on agriculture and environment. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Welcome to this lecture on agriculture and the environment. I hope it is enough to make some of you decide on a career in the field of agricultural science. As you all know, food is a basic human need, and producing enough of it is the single greatest challenge facing the modern world. Developing nations have rapidly expanding populations, so agriculture should be central to any development agenda for those countries. What's more, 75% of people in the developing world are dependent, directly or indirectly, on agriculture for their livelihood. And for many low-income countries, it's the most important sector of the economy, accounting for 50% of GDP, and sometimes it's the primary, if not only, source of foreign currency. Now, of course, when I talk about agriculture, I am using the term to encompass more than just growing food crops. Of course, livestock farming, fishing, and forestry are included. In order to combat wide-scale food shortages, agricultural research programs are underway in many areas. Using science is one way to increase productivity. But, a word of warning, agriculture must also be sustainable. Let's look at approaches that are not sustainable. Firstly, overgrazing and intensive cropping are two ancient but destructive practices that lead to loss of soil fertility. Secondly, the modern idea of liberal application of chemical pesticides and herbicides has had disastrous consequences for the health of the land, ranging from the pollution of water sources to the destruction of wildlife. These practices have ignored the mechanisms that sustain ecological communities. Ignorance has led to the destruction of the very biodiversity that is essential for sustainable food production. However, introducing new agricultural techniques, especially things like genetic engineering, can be difficult because many people remain suspicious of the fact that plants have had their genetic material modified by scientists. Biotechnology has also led to the dubious practice of bioprospecting, or, as some prefer to call it, biopiracy. Foreign multinational companies have been accused of illegally obtaining samples of indigenous plants of other countries in order to get their hands on genetic material to improve the quality or yield of their own crops. We must put aside the controversy surrounding the field of agricultural biotechnology in order to concentrate on the biggest threat to food production on this planet, which is, yes, climate change. The effects of global warming so far have been to shrink the food supply, thereby pushing up prices and making even the most basic necessities unaffordable. As I see it, the international community must address this and other challenges to agricultural production with urgency. Concrete scientific and technological achievements need to be presented for farmers to evaluate and learn to use, but, apart from that, governments need to address the complex issues of policy development if the world's hungry are to be fed. Environmental policies need to be put in place to protect ecosystems and correct soil degradation where possible. Countries cannot continue to exploit natural resources whilst ignoring the consequences. In fact, I'd like to see teams of agriculture and environment experts making up a global network which would monitor the world's farming systems. Different farming systems should be studied not only with a view to analyzing the environmental effects, but the social and economic effects as well. The studies would be carried out with a view to stemming pollution and erosion and promoting safe, cost-effective practices that will guarantee a secure food supply in the future. Monitoring sites would need to be set up all across the world and data collected in a systematic way. Of course, building the online infrastructure for such a project would cost millions of dollars, and there would be ongoing costs involved with the monitoring system. But the information gathered would go a long way towards solving the problem of feeding the masses and ensuring millions of people don't face a hungry future.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.